My name is Bernadette Whitfield. I'm 31 years old, and I work as a senior paralegal in estate planning down in Charleston, South Carolina. Last Sunday afternoon, my father signed a deed transferring my grandmother's house, my parents' Buick, and $90,000 in savings into my younger brother's name. He set the pen down like he had just settled the weather. My mother folded her hands in her lap and said, "He needs it more." My father added, "You can stand on your own." Trevor is 25. He failed out of college twice. He has never held a paycheck for more than 2 months. I did not argue. I did not cry. I lifted my water glass, tipped it half an inch toward my brother, and said, "Congratulations." Then I set my grandmother's safe deposit key on the table. The smiles vanished. If this story is already pulling you in, please take a second to like and subscribe. It really helps stories like mine reach the people who need them. And drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. I'm Bernadette. This is the story of how my parents tried to sign me out of a house I already owned. Let me take you back 2 weeks, to a Sunday in Mount Pleasant. The Monday before that Sunday, I was at my desk at Caldwell and Maitland, the firm I have worked at for 10 years. I had 2 probate files open and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier. Daphne Pickering walked past my cubicle, paused, and tapped the partition. "You alive in there?" she asked. "Mostly. Anything for the weekend?" "Family dinner, Sunday." I said it without looking up. My mother called it important. Daphne raised an eyebrow. She has worked across from me for 3 years, and she has heard exactly 2 stories about my family. She knows the temperature of those 2 stories. She did not ask anything else. She just slid a packet of saltines across my desk and went back to her own work. People who grew up the way I did learn early how to keep the weather inside the house. We learn not to spill it on coworkers. We learn how to say the word family with a soft, neutral mouth, the way you would say insurance or zoning. Most people do not notice. Daphne notices. Daphne is the closest thing I have to a witness. I want to back up further than that Monday. To understand a signing table, you have to understand the house. The house sits on Pitt Street in Mount Pleasant, 2 blocks back from the harbor. It is a low-country single family with a tin roof and a wide front porch. My grandmother bought it in 1981, after my grandfather died, with insurance money and her own savings as a school librarian. She raised my father in the kitchen at the back of that house. He left for college and came home heavier. He came home with my mother. In 1998, when I was 3, my parents' small accounting business collapsed. They moved themselves and a toddler into my grandmother's back 2 bedrooms. They told her it would be temporary. 28 years later, they were still there. Trevor came along in late 2000. The miracle baby, my mother called him, because she had been told she could not have another. From the moment he was placed in her arms, the gravity of the house tilted. There were 2 children in the house, but only one center of gravity. My grandmother saw all of it. She did not speak when my parents were in the room. She watched. She remembered. She slid a hand across the top of my hair when she passed me in the hall. That hand was my whole childhood. The Sunday before the signing, my mother called me She did not call me very often. She called me when there was an announcement. "Your father has decided," she said, in the voice she used to use to introduce surprise birthday cakes. "Sunday, the 22nd, 2 o'clock. Come for an early supper." "What is it about?" "Your father will explain." I drove home to my studio in West Ashley after work that night and put the key away again. It lived in a kitchen drawer, in the same craft envelope my grandmother had handed to her hospice nurse 2 years before. My name was on it, in her round, careful handwriting. I had never opened it. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time looking at the envelope. I did not open it that night either. I closed the drawer. She had said, "Don't open it yet." I kept her instruction. There are 2 stories every family tells itself. The first story is the one for company. The second story is the one for the basement. The 2 are never the same. The company story about the Whitfields was that my father had retired early to focus on family, that my mother had stepped back from hospice nursing because it was too heavy on the heart, that Trevor was a late bloomer, that I was the practical one. The basement story was different. My father had retired because his last firm had let him go. My mother had left hospice because a chart audit was about to find her. Trevor was not blooming. I had not chosen practicality. I had survived by becoming small. I learned which silverware was for company by the time I was 5. I learned which voice my father used for the front porch, and which one he used in the kitchen by 6. I learned that Trevor's name in a sentence meant my name was about to be cut from it. When I was 8, my grandmother caught me crying on the back stairs. I had asked my mother why Trevor got a new bicycle, and I did not. My mother had said, "Bernadette, sweetheart, you don't need that much." My grandmother heard. She put her hand on my shoulder and pointed up. "Up the attic stairs," she said, "with me." The attic had a slanted ceiling and a square window that looked out at the live oaks. There was a chair, an old quilt, and a stack of books. She did not say anything about Trevor. She did not say anything about my mother. She opened a book of Greek myths and told me to read out loud. When I stumbled, she did not correct the word. She corrected the breath. "Some people remember everything, child," she said when I closed the book. "Be one of them." I did not understand the sentence at the time. I felt it. After that, the attic was mine. We went up 2 afternoons a week. She taught me how to hold a fountain pen. She taught me how to write letters by hand and how to read documents slowly. She made me read a contract for a roof repair when I was 12. She said, "Read every word. The trap is always in the small words." I do not think she expected me to become a paralegal. I think she was just preparing me for the house. There were other rooms in that house, but the attic was the only one that was mine. The kitchen belonged to my mother, who measured her sugar in tablespoons and her affection in the same precise way. The dining room belonged to my father, who liked to read the newspaper aloud over breakfast to an audience that was not allowed to interrupt him. The front room belonged to Trevor, who took it over by being a body in the middle of the rug and a remote control on the coffee table. The attic was where my grandmother and I read Aesop, and Plutarch and Mary Oliver, and the user's manual for the washing machine, and the legal disclosures on the back of a credit card offer. She was teaching me, I see now, the same thing in every text. Read every word. Notice the small ones. Notice what is left out. When I was 16, I asked my parents if I could go to private school like Trevor. He had been enrolled in Porter God since 5th grade. I had been at the public middle school on Houston, Northcutt. My father set his fork down. My mother did the smile she did when she was about to say something cruel softly. "You're not that kind, sweetheart," she said. "You're the kind who succeeds anywhere." I did not understand what that meant either. I do now. It meant they had decided long ago that Trevor required the investment and I did not. Investment and love had become the same word in that house. They withheld the one to make a story about the other. I went to the public high school. I worked weekends at a tea shop on Coleman Boulevard. I scraped together community college, then transferred to the College of Charleston on grants and a part-time wage. I graduated in 2014. My grandmother sat in the 3rd row. My parents sat in the 3rd row at Trevor's high school graduation 8 years later. They did not come to mine. They had a conflict that day, my mother said. I did not ask which one. After the ceremony, my grandmother handed me a small white box tied with twine. Inside was a fountain pen, a black pelican with a fine nib, the kind she had used to sign her name on every document she had ever signed. The cap had been engraved on the side in small letters. The engraving said BLW, my initials. She had paid for it out of her own savings. I have it on my desk to this day. It still writes. She did not give a speech that afternoon. She squeezed my elbow and said, "You are a Whitfield. Don't ever forget which kind." I did not understand what she meant. I do now. There were 2 kinds of Whitfields in that house, and she was telling me which kind I was. The kind that read the small words. In 2016, I finished my paralegal certificate at Trident Tech and joined Caldwell and Maitland. I bought my own car. I rented my own apartment. I paid my own loans. The day I signed my first pay stub deposit slip, my grandmother brought me a small wrapped box. Inside was a gold Hamilton wristwatch, my grandfather's, the kind with a thin face and Roman numerals. "He would have wanted you to have it," she said. "He would have wanted you to know when it was time." I wore that watch every day after. The last time I climbed the attic stairs was in the summer of 2018. I was 23. My grandmother was waiting in her chair. She did not have a book in her lap. She had a small brass key on a leather string. "Bernadette," she said, "I am putting some things in order. If I go before you, this opens a box. Keep it with you. Don't open it yet. Don't open it until you need it. You will know." She put the key in my palm and closed my fingers over it. I asked her what was in the box. She just smiled and said, "Time." I went home with that key and put it in the back of a drawer. I told no one. 8 years later, the envelope was still sealed. My grandmother had been dead for 2 of those years. I had not opened it. I had not yet needed to. I had not yet seen the signing table. My grandmother died on a Wednesday in the 2nd week of February, 2024. She had a small stroke at the end of January. She seemed to recover. She did not. The second stroke came on a quiet afternoon with my father in the kitchen making tuna salad. The hospice nurse caught her before she fell. The hospice nurse was the one who called me. The funeral was 3 days later, at the small Episcopal chapel in the old village. Reverend Owen Pritchard officiated. My father read a passage from Ecclesiastes in the voice he uses for clients. My mother wore black gloves and dabbed her cheeks at the right intervals. Trevor wore sunglasses indoors. He did not take them off during the eulogies. He took them off in the parking lot to check his phone. After the service, the hospice nurse, a tall, calm woman named Eleanor, found me near the rose bed and pressed a craft envelope into my hand. My name was on the front in my grandmother's handwriting. "She said to give this to you privately," Eleanor said. "She said you'd know what to do with it." My father was 20 feet away. He did not see. My mother was speaking with 2 cousins. She did not see either. I slipped the envelope into the inner pocket of my coat. The brass key inside the envelope was warm from being held. I drove home to West Ashley that evening with the envelope on the passenger seat. I sat in the parking lot of my building for a long time before I went up. I put the envelope in the kitchen drawer. I did not go back to Pitt Street after that day. My parents settled into the house as if it had always belonged to them. They told the neighbors, in the same warm tone, that they had inherited it from my grandmother. They never said the word probate to me. They never offered me a single object from her room. I let them. I did not have the energy then to ask whether everything they were saying was true. 2 years went by. I learned to live as a daughter without a mother in the room. I learned to live as a granddaughter without a grandmother on the porch. I made small adjustments. I bought my own coffee maker. I started leaving my watch face up on the nightstand instead of putting it back in the drawer. I made my studio into a place I came home to instead of a place I survived. In late 2024, I was promoted to senior paralegal. The raise paid off the last of my college loans. I drove down to the beach at Sullivan's Island that evening, sat on a damp bench, and looked at the dark water for a while. I did not call anyone. There was no one in the family to call. In December 2025, my mother called. Her voice was bright the way it had been when Trevor was little and they were taking him to the doctor for shots. The voice that does not match the news. "He's engaged," she said. "Trevor and Brooke Tilton, the Tilton family up in Awendaw, farm equipment, big people." She said yes. I said congratulations. I said it the same way I would say it 8 weeks later at a signing table, with nothing inside it. My mother did not notice. She kept going. The wedding would be in October. They were already planning. There would be a luncheon. There would be invitations on heavy stock. She did not ask me to be a bridesmaid. She did not ask me to come to the engagement dinner. She did not ask me anything. She told me. Then she hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand. I felt nothing in particular. I had stopped being surprised when I was 12. I had stopped expecting in my mid-20s. By 31, I was a person who received information. 8 weeks later, on Sunday the 15th of February, 2026, my mother called again. It was 9 in the morning. I was making oatmeal. "Your father has decided," she said. "Sunday the 22nd, 2 o'clock, Come for an early supper. Wear something nice. There will be a notary. The word notary went into my ear and did not come back out. What is it about? Your father will explain. If you've ever heard those exact words from a parent, we've already decided. Drop a single word in the comments below how you felt when you heard it. I read every single one of them. Now stay with me. The decision they made was not the one they thought. Sunday, February 22nd, was warm for Mount Pleasant in late winter. I drove across the Ravenel Bridge a little before 2 in the afternoon. The harbor glittered hard enough to make me squint. I had worn a charcoal blouse and gray slacks. I had put the craft envelope in my coat pocket on the way out the door, the way you would pick up an umbrella because the sky looked a particular shade. I had not opened it. I had not needed to. I just wanted it with me. The house on Pitt Street looked the same as it had in childhood. Live oaks, white trim, the same warped third step, the smell of the porch wood when it got warm. I rang the bell out of habit. My mother opened the door. Her hair had been done that morning. There was a sweetness in the air that did not come from food. It came from how hard she was working to seem at ease. The dining table had been cleared of the cloth. The mahogany was bare and gleaming, the way it had been at company dinners when I was small. Papers were arranged in 3 stacks. Trevor and Brooke were already seated at the far end of the table. Trevor was scrolling his phone. Brooke had folded her hands. She was wearing a navy sweater set. She looked tired underneath her makeup. In the chair at the head of the table, where my grandmother used to sit, a man I did not know was seated with a small briefcase open in front of him. He had a stamped seal in his hand. He was sliding it through a pad of red ink. My father introduced him as our notary. He did not give a name. I did not ask. I made a note of the seal style without moving my face. My father gestured for me to sit. I sat to the right of my mother. The chair did not give. My grandmother had bought those chairs at an estate sale in West Ashley in 1982. Today we're making some changes, my father said. He used the voice he used to use when explaining a tax return to a client. Your mother and I have been talking about what's fair to Trevor going forward. He's getting married. He needs a foundation. It's about time he had something solid, my mother said. He has worked very hard. I did not look at Trevor. Trevor did not look at me. He had not made eye contact since I came in. We're moving a few things into Trevor's name, my father said. The house, the Buick, some of the savings. So when he and Brooke begin their life, they can begin it from a foundation. He slid the first document across the table. Quit claim deed. I read it from across the table without moving my head. It was a template, the kind you could download from a self-help legal site at midnight. He had filled in the property description correctly. He had signed his name where the seller signed. He gestured for my mother to sign next to him. She did. The man with the seal stamped them. He smelled like cigarettes and aqua velva. The second document was a title transfer for the Buick. They signed. The seal landed. The third document was a bank form. $90,000 from a joint savings account to Trevor Whitfield individually. They signed. The seal landed. My father set the pen down. He laid both hands flat on the table. He smiled. "Bernadette," he said, We wanted you here today because we wanted you to see this the right way. He needs it more. We know you'll understand. You can stand on your own, sweetheart, my mother added. You always have. We're proud of you for that. For a moment, the room had no sound in it, except the small click of Trevor's smartwatch as he checked it under the table. I learned later that he was placing a live bet on a Premier League game. He had a pattern that way. I lifted my water glass. I tipped it half an inch toward Trevor. I said, "Congratulations." I reached into my coat pocket. I took out the craft envelope. I broke the seal that had been holding for 2 years. The brass key on the leather string slid out into my palm. I placed it on the bare mahogany, exactly between my mother's signature and my father's signature. The room did not move for several seconds. My mother's smile stayed on her face like a held note. My father's hand went to the class ring on his right hand. He twisted it without looking at it. He never twisted it unless he was lying. "What is that, sweetheart?" my mother asked. Her voice had gone half an octave higher. I did not answer. I picked up my water glass again and took a small sip. "Bernadette," my father said. I set the glass down. I picked up my coat. I said, "Thank you for the announcement." I walked out. The third step squeaked under my foot, exactly the way it had squeaked when I was 8. The door pulled shut behind me with the same dry whisper. In the car, in the driveway, I sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. The leather string of the key was still in my hand. The brass was warm from my pocket. Then I drove to the bank. Why? 3 days later, on Wednesday morning, I took a personal day. I drove back across the bridge. The Bank of Coastal Carolina branch on Coleman Boulevard opens at 10. I parked at 9:50. I sat in the lot with the brass key on the leather string in my hand and let myself feel afraid for 1 full minute, the way my grandmother had taught me to feel things. Then I went inside. The young woman at the desk took my ID and the key. She typed at her terminal for half a minute. Her face did not change in any direction. "Box 1208, she said. "Right this way, Ms. Whitfield." The vault smelled like cold metal and old paper. The boxes were arranged in long brass columns. 1208 was on the second row from the bottom. She turned her key. I turned mine. The little door released with a soft sigh. The drawer was longer than I had expected. She left me alone with it in the small private room at the back of the vault, a room with a metal table and a single chair and a green shaded lamp. I closed the door. I sat down. I lifted the lid. There were 4 things inside. The first was a manila folder, neat at the edges, with my grandmother's careful handwriting on the tab. The tab said, "House, Todd, 2018, Hollis and Associates." The second was a black USB stick on a small lanyard. The lanyard was the kind of cord you would put on a name badge. The tag attached said, "For Bernadette. Play with Mr. Hollis." The third was a craft envelope, like the one the key had come in, but thicker. The handwriting on the front said, "Casino Debts, 2017 plus 2020. The fourth was a small carved wooden box, the kind you used to be able to buy at antique stores on King Street. It had been worn smooth at the corners. There was no label. I started with the folder. The first page was a transfer on death deed for the property at 1418 Pitt Street, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Owner of record at the time of execution, Henrietta L. Whitfield. Designated transfer on death beneficiary, Bernadette Whitfield. Date of execution, October 18th, 2018. Notarized by Walter D. Hollis, attorney at law. Witnesses, Caroline E. Brennan, Marion S. Atwood. Stamped, signed, sealed. Behind the deed was a receipt from the Charleston County Register of Men Conveyances, Book 871, page 232, date of recordation, October 22nd, 2018, 11:17 in the morning. The deed had been recorded 8 years ago. The house had legally been mine from the moment my grandmother stopped breathing on February 14th, 2024. I sat very still and read every word twice. I read them a third time because I did not believe my hands. Then I opened the craft envelope. Inside were photocopies, neatly stapled. 2 home equity loans had been taken out against the Pitt Street property. The first was for $87,000, executed in May 2017. The second was for $63,000, executed in March 2020. The signatures on both were my grandmother's. The handwriting was wrong. It was a competent forgery, but it was wrong. The downstroke on the H in Henrietta was sharp in both. My grandmother's H had a small loop at the top. She always made it that way. The H on those documents was a straight line. Behind those photocopies were bank statements. My grandmother's retirement account had been drawn down twice in the same months. $87,000 in May 2017, $63,000 in March 2020. The withdrawals had been moved through a holding account my father controlled. The dates matched the loan payoffs to within a week. I closed my eyes for a second. I opened them. I picked up the wooden box and slid it toward me. Inside, on a bed of dark velvet, was the gold Hamilton wristwatch. The one my grandmother had given me when I was 21. The one I had been wearing every day, except for the last 6 months of her life, when I had taken it to a watchmaker to be cleaned, and I had not picked it up until after the funeral. And by then she was already gone. She had bought it back from the watchmaker without telling me. She had placed it in this box for me to find. She had been thinking, even then, of the day I would sit at a vault table and need an object my own hand recognized. I had been wearing the wrong watch for 2 years. The one I had on my wrist that Wednesday morning was a Timex I had picked up at a drugstore the week after the funeral, when I realized I had lost track of where my Hamilton was. I had assumed my mother had taken it. I had not asked. I had not been able to bring myself to ask. The Hamilton had never been gone. It had been waiting for me in a wooden box, in a brass drawer behind 2 keys. My grandmother had moved it there on the last day she could drive. I slipped the Timex off and laid it on the metal table. I picked up the Hamilton. The leather strap was a little stiff. The face was a little dull. I tightened the strap 1 notch from where I used to wear it. My wrist had thinned in 2 years. I wound the small crown 3 times. The second hand started, smooth and even, as if it had only been waiting for me to come back. I did not cry in the bank. I have not cried in a bank in my life. I picked up my phone. I called the main number for Hollis and Associates. A receptionist answered. I gave my name. There was a half-second silence. Then she said, in a voice that surprised me with its softness, "Mr. Hollis has been waiting for your call for 2 years. Can you come in tomorrow at 3?" I said yes. I closed the drawer. I locked it. I put the brass key back in my pocket. I drove back across the bridge with the watch on my wrist. Walter Hollis's office is on the 4th floor of a brick building on Broad Street, with a tall window that looks out at the steeple of St. Michael's. The room smells like leather chairs and the lemon polish that has been used on the wainscoting since the 80s. When I walked in, Walter Hollis stood up from behind his desk and put both hands on my shoulders the way an uncle would. "Bernadette," he said. "She told me you had her face. She was right." He led me into the small conference room next door. There was a pot of tea, 2 cups, a cream pitcher, and a sugar bowl on the table. A laptop was open at the head of the table, plugged in. I took the chair to the right of it. He took the chair across. "I'd like to play this with you, if that's all right," he said. "I have seen it once. She made me sit through it. She wanted me to know what was in it so I could carry it the same way." I slid the USB out of its small lanyard and pushed it into the side of the laptop. The folder opened. There was one file. The name of the file was Bernadette. I clicked. My grandmother came onto the screen. She was sitting in the armchair in the front room at Pitt Street. The September light was on her hair, which had gone the soft silver of a slate shingle roof. She was wearing the gray cardigan she always wore in the mornings, with a small pearl button at the throat. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked directly into the camera. "Bernadette," she said, "if you are watching this, I am gone, and it is time for you to open the box. So let's begin." I held the edge of the table with both hands. I did not move. "I want to explain what you have just found," she said, "and I want to explain why. The deed is real. It was recorded 8 years ago. The house is yours. It has been yours from the day I stopped breathing. The bank knows. The county knows. Your father does not. Your mother does not. Your brother does not. That was on purpose." She paused. She glanced down at a small notepad in her lap and back up. "I want you to know that I did not do this lightly. I did it because I have watched for 40 years the way decisions get made in this family. I watched what was given and what was taken. I watched who was praised and who was made small. I watched who paid for whom. I knew by the time you were 8 the way it would go." The video shifted. Her voice dropped half a note. "In May 2017, your father took out a home equity loan on this house against my signature. The amount was $87,000. He paid off a debt for Trevor. I do not know the details of the debt. I learned about it when the bank called the house, looking for me, in June. In March 2020, your father did it again. The amount that time was $63,000. Same reason, same kind of debt. I have the loan documents. I have the photocopies. I have the dates. I have the bank statements showing where the money came out of my retirement account to cover them. I never agreed to either loan. The signatures are not mine." She paused again. She looked at the camera the way a librarian looks at a child who has just dropped a glass. "In May 2018, I drove to Walter Hollis's office and asked him to draw up a transfer on death deed for this house. I asked him to register it. I asked my sister Caroline and our cousin Marion to witness it. I had it filed with the county. From the moment I am gone, the house is yours. It is in writing, it is in the courthouse. It cannot be undone by your father with a kitchen table document. She looked down at the notepad. She read out the numbers again. 87,000, 63,000. May 2017, March 2020. She said the dates the way she had taught me to read contracts. She said each word. I knew they would try something the moment I was in the ground. She said, I did not know what shape it would take. I knew the shape would happen. So I left you a key. I left you a folder. I left you Walter. I left you Caroline. I left you the watch. Her face softened. She looked at the camera the way she had looked at me on the back stairs when I was 8. You are the one who remembers, child. You have always been the one who remembers. Let them think they have won until the very last minute. Don't show them anything. Don't argue. Don't cry. Let them sit at the table with their pens. And then you put the key down. She closed her notebook. I love you. Go open the curtains in the attic. There's more sun than they know. The video ended. I sat without moving for a long time. Walter Hollis sat without moving either. The tea on the table had gone cold. They don't know, he said quietly. She did not want them to know. You was... Friday morning, Daphne came into work with 2 coffees instead of 1. She set one on my desk without asking. She sat on the edge of my filing cabinet. Tell me what you need, she said. I told her. I gave her 3 things. The book and page number of the transfer on death deed at the Charleston County RMC, the name and stamp number of the man who had notarized my father's quitclaim, the address of a bank branch where, if I asked her nicely, she could pull a recordation history report for me at lunch. Daphne did not ask any questions. She did not ask why. She just nodded once and went to her desk. By 11:30, she was back. She put a small printout on my desk and tapped it with one fingernail. Book 871, page 232, she said. Transfer on death deed, Pitt Street property, beneficiary Bernadette Whitfield, recorded October 22, 2018. Still active. No release filed. No subsequent transfer in the chain. The house is yours. She slid a second printout across. The quit claim your father signed on Sunday is not in the system. He never filed it. He may have planned to, but as of this morning, it does not exist as a public record. She put the third printout down. The notary your father used is named Lester Calloway, South Carolina Commission, expired June 14th, 2024. He has not renewed. Any notarization he performed after that date is invalid on its face. The seal he used on Sunday is technically the seal of a notary public who, in the eyes of the state, no longer exists. She tapped that last sentence twice. 2 layers of dead, she said quietly. The deed they signed is signed by people who did not have the right to sign it, and witnessed by a notary who did not have the right to witness it. They could not have done this worse if they had tried. I sat back in my chair. I looked at the 3 printouts. Thank you, I said. Bernadette, she said. What are you going to do with this? I'm going to give them one chance to look at it, I said. And then Mr. Hollis is going to read it out loud in a room they cannot leave. Daphne smiled the way only a paralegal can smile. The smile of a person who has watched a will get contested and lost. She did not say anything else. She just nodded. Saturday morning, I drove to Mount Pleasant, but not to Pitt Street. I drove to Aunt Caroline's small white house off Rifle Range Road. She had the porch swing already moving when I came up the walk, the way she did when she was expecting someone. There was a pitcher of sweet tea on a tray. "Sit down, child," she said. She did not get up. "Let me see your face." I sat on the swing next to her. I told her what was in the box. I told her about the video. She nodded once, slowly. "She told me what she was doing," she said. "She told me in 2018. She told me again in January of 2024, when she got Reverend Pritchard's letter ready. She was going to cut them off, you know. She was already drafting it. The first stroke caught her before she could mail it. The second one finished the job." She turned her head and looked at me. "I will sit in any room you ask me to sit in," she said. "I will sign anything you ask me to sign. I will tell anyone in that family exactly what your grandmother told me. The day was always coming. We are just the ones who held the door." I asked her for permission to record her, on my phone, telling that story. She told me to push the button. South Carolina is a one-party consent state. I pushed the button. She talked for 28 minutes. I had it transcribed by Sunday afternoon. Sunday evening, Walter Hollis called my father. He spoke in the warm, formal voice of an attorney who has been in Charleston for 50 years. "Gerald," he said, "there's a small matter on your mother's estate I'd like to clear up before the wedding gets close. A signature your daughter would need to provide. Could you bring the family to my office Monday morning at 10? It won't take long." My father said yes. I imagine he smiled when he hung up. I imagine my mother smiled too. I imagine they thought they were being summoned to receive the final letter of submission from the difficult daughter. I went to bed early. I set the watch face up on the nightstand. I slept. When Monday, the 2nd of March, was the kind of cold, bright morning where the air on the harbor smells like steel. I wore a black blazer and the gray slacks. I put the watch on. I parked on Broad Street at 9:45. Daphne was already in the lobby. She handed me a folder. She did not say anything. She squeezed my wrist once and stepped back. Walter Hollis met me at the elevator on the 4th floor. He walked me into the conference room himself. The room was a long room with a polished walnut table and tall, narrow windows. There were 9 chairs around the table. He had set out water glasses at each place. There were 2 manila folders on the table, one in front of his chair, one in front of mine. There was a closed laptop at the head. He pointed at the second chair on his right. I sat. He sat at the head. Aunt Carolyn came in a minute later, in a navy dress and a small string of pearls, and sat next to me. She nodded to me. She did not smile. At 10 o'clock exactly, the door opened. My father came in first, in the gray suit he always wore to meetings he believed he would win. My mother came in second, in a pale blue dress with the small cross necklace I had grown up watching. Trevor came in third, looking at his phone. Brooke came in fourth, in a dark green skirt and a cream blouse. She did not look at Trevor. She looked at me. My father saw Aunt Caroline. He stopped for half a step. He recovered. He held out his hand to Walter Hollis, as if the room belonged to him. "Walter," he said, "good to see you. Thanks for fitting us in." Walter Hollis shook his hand. He gestured at the chairs. The Whitfields sat on the far side of the table. Brooke sat at the end, near the door. Trevor sat across from me. My mother sat between Trevor and my father. My father took the chair directly across from Walter. "Now," my father said, lifting both hands like a man calling a meeting to order. "We appreciate this, Walter. As I explained, my daughter has agreed to formalize her position on the family property. We took care of it on Sunday. We just need her signature to clean up the paper trail." He smiled at me. "Bernadette." Walter Hollis lifted one finger. The room paused. "Gerald," he said very gently, "before anyone signs anything, I'd like to clarify a few things about the property in question. There is some confusion in the documentation that I am uncomfortable allowing to stand." My father laughed. It was the laugh he used when a client tried to question a tax position. "There's no confusion, Walter. We have the deed. It was notarized Sunday. The transfer is complete." Walter Hollis said. He opened the manila folder in front of him. He laid the first document on the table. He turned it so that it faced my father. He slid it across 2 inches. My mother saw it first. Her eyes went to the bottom corner of the page, where my grandmother's signature was. She made a small sound, not a word. She put a hand to her mouth. Her face went the color of paper. My father had not yet looked. He was still looking at Walter Hollis. "Read it, please," Walter Hollis said. My father looked down. He read the title at the top. His mouth opened slightly. He read it a second time. Then he started reading out loud because he could not help himself, because he had always been a man who needed to perform a thing in order to defeat it. "Transfer on death deed. Property at 1418 Pitt Street. Owner of record, Henrietta L. Whitfield. Designated beneficiary, Bernadette Whitfield. Date of execution, October 18th, 2018. Notarized, Walter D. Hollis. Witnesses, Caroline E. Brennan, Marion S. Atwood." His jaw locked. He looked at Walter Hollis. He looked at me. He looked back at the page. "This is a forgery," he said. The word fell on the table the way a glass falls. Trevor stopped scrolling. Brooke folded her hands tighter in her lap. I lifted my eyes from my water glass. I looked at my father for the first time since I had walked into the room. "You want to talk about forgery?" I said. "Let's open the laptop." Walter Hollis opened the laptop. He turned it slightly so that everyone at the table could see the screen. He clicked the file. He set the speaker volume 2 notches above normal. My grandmother came onto the screen. My mother made a small sound from the back of her throat. The sound was the word "mom," almost not spoken. She put her hand on the table and gripped the edge. "Bernadette," my grandmother said in her clear, steady voice, "if you are watching this, I'm gone." My father put a hand up as if to stop the video. Walter Hollis did not look at him. He just raised the volume 1 more notch. "The deed is real," my grandmother said, It was recorded 8 years ago. The house is yours." My father stood up halfway. "Walter, turn that off." Walter Hollis did not turn it off. He folded his hands over the open folder and looked at my father over the rims of his glasses. He said in his gentlest voice, "Gerald, sit down, please." My father sat down. "In May 2017, my grandmother said, your father took out a home equity loan on this house against my signature. The amount was $87,000. My father's hand went to the class ring. He twisted it without looking down. In March 2020, your father did it again. The amount that time was $63,000. My mother began to cry. She did not make any noise. The tears went down her face onto the small cross necklace. She did not lift her hand to wipe them. My grandmother went on. She read the dates. She read the numbers. She read the name of the holding account. She read the bank statements. She did not raise her voice once. When the video ended, Walter Hollis closed the laptop. The room was completely silent. The harbor was too far away to hear. There was only the low whir of the heater behind the wainscoting. Aunt Carolyn turned in her chair. She set her glass of water down. "I sat with your mother in May 2018, she said to my father. Her voice was steady. "I watched her sign that deed at this firm. I witnessed it. I drove her home that afternoon. In January of 2024, she sat with me on my porch and told me she was going to cut both of you off. She had Reverend Pritchard helping her draft the letter. She did not get to mail it. The first stroke came that week." She looked at my mother. She did not look unkindly. "She didn't trust you anymore, Diane. She didn't trust either of you." My mother lowered her hands. She did not look at my father. She looked at the photograph on the wall behind Walter Hollis. It was a photograph of the Charleston Bar Association banquet from 1996, with maybe 40 men in dark suits arranged in 3 rows. My grandfather was somewhere in that picture. I do not know if she could see him or if she was just looking at the wall because there was nowhere else to look. "Diane," Aunt Caroline said. Her voice was softer now. "She did not stop loving you. She stopped trusting you. They are different things. She wanted you to know the difference." My mother nodded, very slightly, without taking her eyes off the photograph. She did not say anything. My father pushed his chair back. The legs scraped the floor. He stood up. His face was red. The class ring was on his right hand. He was twisting it. "This is a setup," he said. This is a hostile setup. I'll sue. I'll sue every one of you. I'll sue this firm. I'll sue." Walter Hollis raised one hand. He spoke the way you would speak to a man with his hand on a hot stove who has not noticed. "Gerald," he said, "please listen. The quitclaim deed you executed Sunday has not been filed with the county. Even if you file it tomorrow, it cannot transfer title to property that is no longer in your name. It has not been in your name since the morning of February 14th, 2024. The transfer on death deed took effect the moment your mother died. Furthermore, the notary you used Sunday, Mr. Lester Calloway, has been operating under an expired commission since June of 2024. Any document he stamped is invalid on its face, even in the best-case version of your account of events. Your signing on Sunday was not legally a signing. My father did not sit down. He did not stand either. He stood in the room like a man whose floor had stopped existing. His mouth opened twice. No sound came out. He looked at the document on the table. He looked at the laptop. He looked at Aunt Caroline. He did not look at me. He had not looked at me directly since Walter Hollis had said the word Sunday. I sat very still. I had been told by a woman in a gray cardigan in a recorded video what to do in the next 30 seconds. She had told me to let him sit with it. She had told me not to fill the silence. So I did not. My mother said in a voice that was not quite hers, "Walter, please, please, there has to be." Walter Hollis turned his head a quarter inch toward her. "Diane," he said, "your mother-in-law sat in this office for 90 minutes in 2018 and asked me to draw a document that would survive whatever your husband did next. I drew it. She signed it. She had it recorded. There is nothing for me to do here today except read it out loud." Brooke Tilton, at the end of the table, stood up. She was very quiet about it. She unscrewed the small diamond from her left ring finger. She placed it on the table neatly, in the small puddle of light from the window. She did not look at Trevor. She looked at me. She gave me a single, small nod. She picked up her purse. She walked out. The door closed behind her, with the same dry whisper my grandmother's front door had made the Sunday before. Trevor stared at the ring. He did not move. He did not look at our parents. My mother put both hands over her face. My father sat down. He did not say anything else. I picked up the wooden box from beside my chair. I opened it. I took out the gold Hamilton wristwatch. I had been wearing one all along. The one in the box had been my grandfather's other one. The small one she had kept in her own jewelry drawer. The one she had not given me yet because she had said at 23, "Maybe when you turn 40. I put it in my pocket. I stood up. "Walter," I said, "thank you." I looked at my father. I did not look at him for very long. "You will receive notice from this firm by close of business," I said. "You have 60 days to vacate the house." If you've ever sat in a room where the truth finally arrived too late for the people who needed it most, you understand what I felt next. Take a breath with me. And if a quiet woman in your life ever handed you something and told you, "Don't open it yet, write her name in the comments. She deserves it." 60 days went quickly. My parents moved into a small rental in North Charleston, a one-bedroom over a hardware store on Rivers Avenue. They did not call me. They did not write. I learned about the rental from a cousin who had seen my mother carrying a small lamp through the parking lot at the back. The cousin did not say anything cruel about it. He just said the lamp was the one from the front room at Pitt Street, and that he had thought I might want to know. The Buick was returned to the dealer because the title had never legally transferred, and the loan was in their name. The $90,000 was clawed back by the bank when the transfer was unwound. The mobile notary, Lester Calloway, was reported to the South Carolina Secretary of State, and his commission was permanently revoked. The civil suit for the elder financial abuse damages, the $150,000 my grandmother's retirement account had paid out, plus interest, was filed by Walter Hollis on the morning of March 10th. It is still working through the system. I do not need to attend most of it. I have a paralegal for that. Trevor moved to Atlanta. He did not say goodbye. I learned about his departure when his Instagram changed location 2 weeks after the meeting. He no longer follows me. I do not follow him. I do not know whether he understands what he was part of. I do not need to. He was 25 at the table. He had time then to choose. He chose. Brooke Tilton sent me a card in early April. It was a plain card with a thank you on the front. Inside, she had written only one line. It said, "Your grandmother knew." She signed her first name. I keep the card in the kitchen drawer where the craft envelope used to live. I moved into the house on Pitt Street the second weekend of April. I brought one suitcase the first night. I slept in my grandmother's room. In the morning, I opened the curtains in the attic for the first time in 2 years. There was, exactly as she had said, more sun than they had known. Reverend Pritchard came by on a Tuesday afternoon in late April. He brought a small loaf of bread from his wife and sat on the porch with me for an hour. He did not ask about the meeting. He just told me what he and my grandmother had been working on in the last month of her life. He had drafts of 2 letters in his coat pocket. One was to my father. One was to my mother. They had been finished a week before the first stroke. They had not been mailed because she had wanted to read them one more time. He asked if I wanted them. I said yes. I read them that evening. They were patient, exact, and not unkind. They said everything she had been holding for 40 years. I put them in the kitchen drawer next to the brass key. I hung the second gold Hamilton wristwatch on a small nail on the wall above the chair where she used to read. I wear the first one every day. I left her cardigan in the closet where she had kept it. I keep the brass key on the leather string in the kitchen drawer. She didn't raise her voice once. She didn't have to. She just remembered